This program is brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. For many of you watching this evening, the idea of a simpler life may be in a place like this, with probably no electricity and therefore no television, no Wi-Fi, no smartphones and other electronic gadgets would be your personal idea of a nightmare. But for those of you who have managed their addiction to electronics and can consider a simpler life, you will find that an attention span that has not been kamikazed by a constant barrage of electronic noise will allow you to focus more at the tasks you have at hand. Be more present for both your work and your personal relationships. Residents here get to stop and smell the roses, so to speak. And waking and sleeping hours are more in tune with natural cycles. One goes to sleep here surrounded by the soothing sounds of nature. Not too long after the calming glow of sunset and in a nicely dark room, unassaulted by the glow of electronic lights. But no, when most of you think comfort and rest, you mistakenly think of places that have all the modern trappings. A television in practically every single room. Gadgets that are going to ping all day and even emit a glow when charging all night. So-called modern conveniences that have turned even children into screen junkies, sneaking in screen time long after they've been sent to bed. Professor Kiran Bhagat says blue and junk light are some of the factors that have people getting poorer quality sleep, spending on all types of sleep aids and therapies, tired and unproductive much of the time. You, the First Issues viewer, have requested that he delve deeper into the subject of sleep that was presented in our ongoing Own Your Day, Own Your Life productivity segment. We have chosen to indulge you this evening and trust that tonight's conversation will help us all have a different appreciation for sleep and an overall quality of life. Just to start off, why do we as human beings sleep?
If we start with the brain, a lack of sleep provides during the day a lack of focus, a lack of concentration, a lack of balanced emotion, a lack of reservation. You snap, you lose your temper. If we go to the heart, we know that if people who haven't slept well, because they've not slept well, they are in what we call a hyper-stressed situation. The body is tense because it's not had its rest. So the heart rate goes up, the blood pressure goes up, the heart speeds up more, the heart is at more risk of having a heart attack. We know that in Europe and in parts of the north where they do what is called daylight saving, because the winters they have less light, so they change the timing. The time that they actually reduce in terms of time saving, during the winter the risk of heart attack goes up in the northern hemisphere, and we relate that to a lack of sleep. We know that people that sleep less have much higher rates of blood pressure and stroke. We know that diabetes goes up because if you sleep less, the body thinks that you are in a state of distress, you are looking for food, so that it switches on the hunger hormone, the hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone, so the levels of hunger hormone go up if you don't sleep. It's the reason why people who don't sleep tend to be more obese, because the less you sleep, the more hungry you get, the more you eat. The more obese you get, the more sleep apnea you get, and you get yourself into a vicious circle. So diabetes, blood pressure, stroke, amnesia, dementia. We know that the muscles begin to deteriorate. We know that rats in an experiment who are deprived of sleep die within 9 to 10 days, and they die of a number of things. They die of septicemia, which is an infection of the body. The body develops infection in the bloodstream. And the reason that happens is that the immune system goes down when you have not enough sleep. People who don't sleep are much more prone to getting infections. So the rats get skin infections, their hair falls out, and the natural bacteria in the gut now begin to penetrate the gut because the gut becomes thinner, and those bacteria then circulate into the bloodstream and they get sepsis. So we know that infection goes up if you don't sleep very well. We know that mental disease goes up. We've talked about a higher incidence of depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, manic depression, all goes up with a lack of sleep. So these are a number of issues that occur in terms of disease when you don't get enough sleep. And we're beginning to understand that the cheapest, safest, easiest way to remain healthy is to actually get good sleep. We know equally that sleep is probably the best anti-aging product on the market. So there are a lot of benefits from a good natural night's sleep.
Would you say then that it is our modern lifestyle that has led to all these challenges and issues with sleep? Were people sleeping better in, let's say, 1920 as opposed to 2019?
Absolutely, Namit. So I think, one of the benefits, but a scourge that has occurred, is the invention of the light bulb. The light bulb has changed, who was it? Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, has changed the whole course of history. Because now we don't have to obey nature. You don't have to follow the setting sun. You can stay awake, do more work, be more productive, in inverted commas, and take your work home. In the days where we had candles, the candle would eventually disappear and the wax would disappear. You had to go to sleep. Or if you didn't have that, you'd go to sleep. Our ancestors would go to sleep when they ate at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon or evening and went to sleep because there was nothing else to do, and they went. So their sleep cycles were better. We know that they were healthier. We know that they were less obese. We know that the incidence of psychiatric disease wasn't as greater. We know that their immune systems were stronger. And we know that as people became more urbanized, they became more accustomed to living under junk light and digital media, many of the lifestyle diseases that we've talked about in our previous programs begun to surface. So these are the trappings of modernization, but also the trappings of insomnia. Beware those people that tell you, I can get away, I can get by taking 3 or 4 hours of a nap and I'm fine. We know, for example, a classic name, I can drop 2 names, Margaret Thatcher, one of the previous Prime Ministers of Great Britain, and Ronald Reagan, both used to show off, and now more recently Donald Trump, that they can get away with 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Both Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan died of dementia, died of Alzheimer's disease. And we're beginning to correlate lack of sleep with many diseases that occur during the body because of the natural vital health functions that occur during sleep. So the first thing to say to you is that sleep is a natural process and it has different phases. We must go in and out of those phases. You must get both phases of rapid eye movement and non-rapid eye movement during sleep in order for you to dream, and we'll talk about the value of dreaming as well as when you're actually not dreaming. And you get into such a deep phase of sleep where we know that when we monitor the brainwave pattern of somebody who's sleeping in deep sleep, it's almost that of somebody who's in a coma. So literally every night we are going into a coma and coming out of that coma refreshed. So what is it that occurs during that sleep that refreshes the body is now the questions that we're now tackling in sleep medicine.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world. Because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB. How can we help you?
Welcome back to First Issues as we continue our conversation with Professor Kiran Bhagat, speaking about the true importance of sleep to our overall quality of life. How does one best prepare for sleep? What can I do to improve my chances of having a good early night sleep?
Well, I think the 3 or 4 things that argue against, and one of the main reasons sleep experts have identified poor sleep hygiene, let's call it that, are 1, caffeine, 2, alcohol, 3, digital media, and 4, the 9 to 5 clock that we have, that you need to be in at work at 8 o'clock and you need to leave at 5 o'clock. And so we're squeezed for time, we're taking too much caffeine, and we know, for example, let's take the issue of caffeine. If you drink a caffeinated product after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that caffeine will still be in your system at 8 o'clock at night. And so if you have 1 or 2 cups of coffee because you can't keep awake during the day because you haven't slept well at night, you get yourself into a vicious circle and you can't sleep because the caffeine is still in your system, or the tea, which also contains a form of caffeine, is in your system. Those that take a cup of tea at night, those that take a drink of alcohol to sleep at night, you know, what do you call it, a nightcap. These are things that really should not be done, because alcohol, what alcohol does in terms of making you sleep is it blunts the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't activate the necessary sleep mechanisms that give you a natural sleep. Everybody knows when they've had too much to drink and they fall asleep, the following morning they still feel tired, because what they've done is they've knocked off a part of the brain that doesn't allow you, they've numbed a part of the brain that doesn't allow you to think, but it's not activated the natural sleep responses that occur during sleep. So so there's coffee, there's alcohol, and of course the biggest culprit, particularly in the younger population, is the blue light from a digital screen. Whether it's a computer, whether it's your iPad, whether it's your iPhone, whether it's the your television screens. We know, for example, that the blue light that comes out is the light that activates the brain to think that it's still daylight. That blue light is a part that hits the back of the eye and switches off a particular sleep chemical that's called melatonin. Melatonin is a sleep chemical, and when the sun sets, that blue light of the sky fades. The body knows, because it's darker, to switch on the sleep mechanisms. When you have junk light that we talk about, the lights that we have in this office, or the lights that you stare at a screen, the brain still believes that it's daytime. So it prevents you from that sleep cycle. And so you're delaying the sleep cycle even more. And I know lots of people who have children who are up at night watching their phone, watching the social media, watching the iPad, and having lack of sleep. And this is a critical time in a young person or teenager's brain time, where the brain is still forming, for them not to have adequate sleep.
Are there any aids that help sleep? You've said that the sleeping pills and the nightcaps aren't good aids. Are there good sleeping aids?
Yes, I think the most natural sleeping aid is a good book. We are now also advising people to try and change the type of lights that they use. And believe it or not, the best lights are actually an orange light or a softened reddish light. We know that these are the lights of a setting sun. We know that that's the lights of a sunset. And the orange hue and the red hue, and you can get these bulbs from any store. If you put them next to your bedroom, it'll actually give you much better light. And the same with the children. If the children have a red light or an orange light, they will actually have a much more calm sleep than if you have a white light. The second thing to do is to actually, you may have a warm beverage, you may have warm milk, you may have warm Milo, you may have a Horlicks at night. The warm milk actually allows you to sleep better as well. The bedroom should never be too hot. We know that the bedroom temperature, the ideal temperature to sleep, is between 18 to 90 degrees centigrade. If you warm the bedroom too much, particularly as winter approaches, you actually get very poor sleep. The body needs to cool down. If the body is warm, it thinks that it's awake.
What happens when we do join Team 5 a.m. and rob ourselves of the necessary 7 to 8? What happens when we don't get enough sleep?
The natural functions of sleep, Named, so the most important one, I guess, from a mental perspective, is memory consolidation and creativity. We know that students that cram the night before, everybody's done this one-nighter where the night before an exam you're cramming. We know that students that do that actually never consolidate their memory, because the times and phases during sleep and the functions of sleep are to sort out the things that you did during the day, to consolidate, to package. It's almost like you are archiving the books that you learned today, the exposure, the people that you met, the conversations that you had, the matters that you learned about. The brain is now shelving it and packaging it and categorizing and computerizing it. That all occurs during sleep and different phases of sleep. So if you cram a one-nighter, an exam before, you will not actually do as well as you think you are. And everybody's been through that phase where they've got to that stage at night where they're turning the page, but they've forgotten what they read the page before. Because all you're doing is you're opening up, you're staring at a blank page, and you're not absorbing. And this is also what happens in terms of emotion and in terms of creativity and forethought. We know that the most important part of the brain that distinguishes us from the ape is what's called your prefrontal cortex, the thing that's right at the front of your brain. That's the center of higher learning. That is the part of the brain that regenerates the most during sleep. And if you have not had sufficient sleep, you're not able to plan, you're not able to analyze, you're not able to hold your emotions. We know, for example, that the classic thing that occurs when you have alcohol is it blunts your prefrontal cortex. You become more sociable, you become less inhibited because you're blocking the parts of the brain that tell you be quiet, you know, be conservative.
Don't do that.
Don't say that, don't do that. And it's the same thing that happens when you don't have enough sleep. We know from sleep experts that if you have a late night party and you don't drink, but you go home at a late hour or an early hour of the morning, it's the equivalent of having 1 or 2 beers. That's how much your brain is fatigued. That's how much your brain is drunk on a lack of sleep. And so, you know, we talk about people, we have these great messages and an understandable message, don't drink and drive. We should also be planning to tell our population, don't be fatigued and drive. We know from American studies that every 20 seconds in the United States of America, somebody is having an accident because of lack of sleep. That's far greater than alcohol does.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world. Because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB. How can we help you?
Welcome back to First Issues. The 2019 Grant Thornton International Business Report that surveys the opinions of 5,000 business leaders from 135 different economies across the globe has found that optimism has dropped from an average 54% to just 39% this year, fueled by political instability. In stark contrast, Botswana recorded 62% optimism for the local business environment, significantly higher than not just the global average, but also the continental African outlook of 41% and neighboring South Africa's outlook of just 27%. What is behind this optimism? Unpacking the numbers this evening is Managing Director at Grant Thornton Botswana, Kalyanaraman Vijay. We ask him, how is it Botswana has managed to record higher levels of optimism than both the continental and global averages?
Political stability is a huge reason for this. Now that brings a lot of confidence onto the businesses. Now we've used to having optimism in the air over the years, no doubt about it, but then came the downturn in 2008 when fundamentals started getting questioned, and we've seen cycles since then. So first and foremost reason is we need to be very comfortable that we have a very stable political economy. On the base of that, how are we going to be? There could be challenges here and there in that process, but relative to what's happening in the world, we are sitting at a much wonderful platform. Now this is the space where private businesses, private sector, to see how well do we take this opportunity. Yes, the going is not as easy as what used to be before. Things are getting tougher. The economic growth in Botswana is sitting at what, about 4%, as against the global growth which is sitting at 3.7%. So it's not that the growth here is buoyant, but certainly opportunities are there for the private sector to make the best out of it.
Speaking of opportunities, can you identify any?
Okay, when you look at opportunities in our economy as Botswana, I'm sure at any given point of time in the last 20 years, what has been put as the message for the country is diversification and employment creation. That's been the twin pillars for Botswana as an economy. When you look at the current scenario, I feel that the government spending to start with has been pretty good compared to our neighbors, which is there for most of us to make the best out of it. Even though the privatization aspect has not been as effective as it was in the past, but I'm hoping that with the kind of plans which are here, privatization is something which is going to happen, which opens up new doors for private sector. If you take regions which are not necessarily doing very well, take our Piquet region, the tax benefits, incentives given is one of the best in Africa. I have not seen 5% tax anywhere else, actually across Africa or even in the world. Forget about the tax havens. So this is real invitation for businesses to come and set up operations in this part of the world. The benefits we have in terms of special economic zones is again a new opening for businesses to come and set up operations here, bring new technologies and help us partner in terms of bringing new things into, and in that process creates employment. And when I look at fundamentally where are we heading, as part of our Vision 2036, we want to move away from mining resource-based economy to a knowledge-based economy. And all these aspects which I mentioned is only taking us towards a knowledge-based economy. So most important thing is for us to see how well are we going to make use of government as a facilitator and leave it at that spot. And it's the private sector which needs to make sure that they partner in such a way that things do happen. That would be my say in terms of how the opportunities can be made good use of by the private sector.
With that, it's good night from me, Namizo Samakula, and the First Issues team. This program was brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?